Hold on, and let people in from the waiting room?
There is no wait room, so all the participants are here.
For some reason, I can't see any of them. Okay.
Okay, so great. Welcome everyone to the first seminar or webinar in this series. So we have this set up as a series that's starting today, and then we hope that monthly or once every 2 months we'll have a speaker. And the series is focused on data-driven understanding of meditation and consciousness, or DUNES. And so it kind of brings together two different themes of research, research on the science of meditation and also research on the science of consciousness. They don't necessarily overlap, but we kind of put them together as a matter of interest and convenience. And then the goal of this webinar series is to kind of bring in folks who are working in the area to give research talks and to create conversations and potential new collaborations and whatnot with with the broader group, our audience. And we expect that the talks will involve intersections of neuroscience, psychology, imaging, and and data analysis, statistics, machine learning, whatnot. And so so this is sort of a series that's aiming to bring together people from the biomedical, psych, neuro disciplines and computational data science kind of disciplines, and create new conversations and collaborations. So I'm very happy for everyone joining us on this webinar series, and we hope that you will enjoy the talks, and you're welcome to contribute to participate and ask questions and interact with the speaker and whatnot. So the speaker today is Sara Lazar. And just a quick bio: she's an associate professor in the psychiatry department at Mass General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. The focus of her research is to elucidate the neuromechanisms underlying the beneficial effects of meditation and yoga, both in healthy individuals and in clinical settings. She has been practicing mindfulness meditation and yoga since 1994, and her research has been well published and covered by numerous news outlets, including the New York Times, USA Today, CNN, and WebMD. And today's talk, she'll be discussing her work on learning not to fear. So with that, I would like to hand over to Sara and begin our talk. Thank you,
Great.
Sara.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to be the inaugural speaker for this. It's really wonderful to see that there's so much interest in this topic. Right, so as today I'm going to be talking about pain, fear, meditation, in the brain. That'll be the majority of the talk. And at the end, if there's time, I'll talk a little bit about healthy cognitive aging. So we'll see how far we get. And there'll be breaks a couple times in the during the talk. So if people have an urgent question, they can ask it then. Otherwise, we can put it all to the end, just because I want to make sure we don't run out of time. So, right, so we're going to start off just with mindfulness. I know probably most of you know about mindfulness, so just to get us all on the same page, or in case there's a few people who don't. So mindfulness, the common definition of mindfulness is purposely paying attention to experiences in the present moment in a non-judgmental way. Right, so we see this woman as she's walking through the forest is completely oblivious to what's actually going on around her, right? She's thinking about everything that's going on in her day. Versus this woman is tuned into just what's going on around her, right? No thoughts about the rest of what's going on in her life, right? She's just noticing the trees, the sunshine, perhaps the feel of the wind on her face, the feel of the ground underneath her feet. So that's what mindfulness is all about. You'll notice that neither one of them is meditating, right? And this is really key, that you don't have to meditate to be mindful, right? Anyone and everyone has the capacity to be mindful. But the deal is that, if you're just by yourself walking through the woods, it's pretty easy to be mindful. But when you're doing your everyday normal activities, you're much more likely to be like this, right? And you forget that we should be, even when you're driving or dealing with the taxes or dealing with all the difficult people in your life, can you remember to be mindful, right? And that's what really makes a difference in our lives, is when we're able to bring mindfulness into every interaction that we have during the day. And that's really hard. And so that's why we practice mindfulness meditation. So mindfulness meditation, just like any other skill, or sort of mindfulness, like any other skill, can be learned. It can be strengthened. It can be, used in more dynamic ways and more spontaneously. And so that's why we practice mindfulness meditation, is to bring this quality into more activities of our life, not just when we're walking through nature on a beautiful day. This last part of the definition often gets people a little tripped up, because it's like non-judgmental. And so they seem to think it's like, this doesn't mean that you, without discernment, right? So you can still make distinctions between things. The idea being, we're trying not to say this is better than this is not better, right? It happens to be a beautiful sunny day, but even if it's a cloudy, gloomy day, can you still have that same balance of inner calm and peace and happiness, right? Or if it's, walking through, an urban scene and it's on a snowy, yucky day, can we still be okay? Or do we like, oh my God, it's snowing and it's griffy and it's right? So can we have that same attitude towards a beautiful sunny day in the woods as a yucky day in the city, right? And so this idea, this non-judging, this equanimity, is another word for it is equanimity, or this balance. And the key thing is that it's non-reactive and it's open, right? So judgy is kind of closed versus equanimity is more open, right? So mindfulness meditation. So how do we practice this mindfulness? So it's just about bringing this open, relaxed, curious awareness to present moment experience, right? So right now, you could all just tune in, like what's going on for you right now, right? So you're listening, you're hearing, you're seeing things on the screen. Perhaps you can tune in to the feel of your body making contact with your chair or your couch in my case. So when we practice mindfulness meditation, the primary focus is the breath, body sensations, and sensory stimuli. So you could just sit here and just be aware of the sounds. Instead of saying, oh, that's a plane overhead. Oh, that's a car honking. Why isn't it quiet? I don't like that there's a plane overhead. I need to be more quiet. Can we just be like, okay, there's noise in the background, right? Or just there's sound, right? Because even noise is a little bit judgy, right? So there's sound in the background. And can I be okay with that sound in the background? Right. The key thing is that it's awareness of the present moment. So we're not lost in thought. We're not spaced out. We're not in a trance, right? We're just aware of what's actually happening right now. And the key thing is having this non-judgmental attitude, right? So it doesn't matter what's happening. Can I still be okay with it? So now, about 30, almost 40 years ago now, a man named John Kabat-Zinn realized that, because he practiced meditation, he went to Asia and practiced meditation with a bunch of different teachers. And what he realized was that this quality of mindfulness is really important and that it's really useful. And so, yes, it's extremely useful for, altering consciousness and for spiritual growth and development. But it would also be really useful for just everyday folks to handle the everyday stresses of life. So he came up with a program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, or MBSR. We're going to be talking about MBSR a lot today. And what is, it's an 8-week group intervention. It's completely secular. There's stress education and actual meditation practice. So you actually in class spend 40 minutes of class practicing mindfulness meditation. And they do 3 different types of it. So one is a body scan, where you just start at the top of your head and just notice, what does the top of my head feel like? Like, when's the last time you tuned into your scalp? Can you feel your scalp? What do you actually notice up there? Right? And you very slowly move your attention down through your face, your neck, your head, down through your arms, your torso, through your legs. And just tuning into, what am I actually feeling? What's actually going on in my body? Right? So that's a body scan. You also just do present moment awareness, like we just talked about. I'm talking fast. I'm aware that I'm talking fast. Right? So again, sounds, sensations of the couch, breathing sensations. And then the third one is yoga. This is not the yoga you get at the gym. It's more, as I raise my arms overhead, how do I know my arms are moving? What's the actual sensation in my arms? How do I know where my arm is, right? How, can I just really tune into the actual sensations in my body as I move? Right? And so it's not about getting in a pretzel. It's not about toning your abs or your arms. It's just about training awareness. The other key thing is that anytime mindfulness exercises, this is really the hallmark of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. So you practice for 40 minutes a day. But again, the goal is that when you're out in nature or doing your things or walking through the urban jungle, can you be mindful? So can you train yourself to have even just a moment here and there throughout the day of mindfulness? So as you're walking, say, from your house to your car, just that, 10, 20, 30 seconds it takes to get from your house to the door of your car, can you just tune in and be aware of the sensation of your feet on the ground, or the key in your hand, right? Or whatever it may be that you're feeling, right? As you're walking from your car into your office, can it be like that first slide? Can you just notice the sunshine and the buildings or whatever it is? And so if you can just find a few minutes throughout the day where you can just tune in and be mindful just for a few seconds, it really helps build the momentum, and so that you really get to be mindful more and more and more throughout your day, regardless of what you're doing. All right, so there's been thousands of studies now demonstrating this program is really good for reducing stress, both self-reported stress, but also biomarkers of stress like cortisol and other inflammation and these sorts of things. It's really good for reducing symptoms of depression, anxiety, pain, and insomnia. I meant other things too, but these are the 4 I mentioned because these are the 4 most common psychiatric conditions, and they're also they're common both by themselves and in conjunction with other conditions. So if you have heart disease or cancer or diabetes, it's extremely likely that you have at least one of these also. And we know from the whole mind-body thing that often if you can reduce the depression and anxiety, that makes physical symptoms better. And not completely cure them, but there's, these tend to make physical symptoms worse. So if we can have an impact on these, we can have secondary impacts on physical conditions. Importantly, it's also increasing the good stuff. So people report being more satisfied, excuse me, more happy, more resilient, more in tune with life, increased creativity, a wealth of really positive things. And that work is just getting started. But it's really clear that it has these positive impacts as well. All right, so now, I started practicing this back when I had knee pains, a sports injury. And I started practicing yoga as a form of physical therapy. And very quickly, I started realizing that, wow, there was a lot more to yoga than just stretching. I've been stretching and exercising for years. I knew it wasn't exercise. It wasn't stretching. There was something about yoga that was different. And I could see that how I was interacting with the world, how I saw people, how I interacted with people was really changing. So I knew something was happening in my brain. So I decided to do some studies to study, okay, could meditation and yoga change your brain? And the short answer is yes, right? So we put people through this MBSR program. It is an 8-week meditation program. And what we found is that compared to a weightless control, that there were increases in gray matter in the meditation group compared to the controls, right? So the actual structure of the brain is changing with just 8 weeks of practice. There was 4 changes. 3 of them are here. One of them is the posterior cingulate. One is an area called the supramarginal gyrus, which is just here next to your ear, and then the hippocampus. And what's really cool about these 3 regions, I should just back up. So what are they? So the posterior cingulate, this is the part of the brain that's most associated with me, right? So whenever I'm thinking about anything in relationship to me, I'm going to light this up. It's also the area that's most associated with mind wandering, because when we mind wander, we tend to think about ourselves, right? It tends to just be, so there's self-related processes. The SMG is about attention. Do I pay attention to the inside world or the outside world? Because again, with meditation, you're trying to bring more and more and more attention to the inner world, right? And or how your inner world is interacting with the outer world. It's also important for attention in general. It's also important for things like empathy and creativity and compassion. And the final region is the hippocampus, which is important for memory. What's really cool about these 3 regions is that they work together in a network called the default mode network, right? As the name implies, the default mode network is the area of the brain that tends to light up when you're not doing anything in particular. And we know from a lot of different research that this default mode network, it's off in depression and anxiety, it's off in Alzheimer's disease, it's off in many psychiatric conditions. That the wiring or the structure of this thing, this region of these regions, is greatly impacted by psychopathology. And what we're seeing is changes in these regions. And I'm not going to show you now, but there's definitely hints, and actually I'll show you a little bit of this in the second half of the talk. that these structural changes are leading to positive beneficial changes, which relevant into depression and anxiety. Right. Okay, that's that region. So the other region, the fourth region we found was the amygdala. The amygdala is the fight or flight part of the brain. And what we saw is that it got smaller and that the change in the amygdala correlated with changes in stress, right? So the more stress reduction people reported, the smaller their amygdala became. And this is really important because up until this point, a lot of people have said, well, people going through this course, they paid a lot of money, so it's a placebo effect, right? Or it's been 2 months. Of course they feel less stressed because whatever stressed them out 2 months ago is probably past. And so, it couldn't possibly be the course. It had to be something else. But this really suggests that no, the reason why they're feeling less stress is because their amygdala is getting rewired, right? And that there's an actual physical change in their amygdala. So these were all really important bits and pieces of information. All right, so I'm going to talk now about pain.
Sarah,
Yep,
I had a quick question. So,
yes.
So reduction in the perceived stress is corresponding to less concentration of gray matter in the amygdala, or is it the other way around?
Correct. So, and that's a good question, right? And so less times people, so this is okay, it gets a little bit into the weeds here a little bit, but it's a good thing. So neurons look kind of like trees with lots of roots and lots of branches. And so when we say the amygdala is getting smaller, it's not that we're killing off cells. We might be killing off cells, but I don't think so. What we know is that with neuroplasticity, what happens is that we can greatly increase or decrease the number of connections that a cell produces, that a neuron produces. So the number of branches, the number of roots it produces. And they've shown in animal studies that if you stress animals out, that same region of the amygdala sprouts branches and trees galore. And sort of like it's sending out like, okay, hold on, danger. We got to send, anxiety everywhere in the brain. And so this suggests that it's like, okay, no, we don't need to do that. And again, so it's sort of toning that down and turning that down. We can't say that for sure because we can't look at branching and whatnot. So we don't know that's the case. We also know that because gray matter, there's the neurons, but there's also blood vessels, there's glia, there's a lot of other things going on in the tissue. And again, animal work shows that it kind of doesn't matter. Like, they've taken animals and trained them, and they'll get increases in gray matter, and then they can go and actually chop things up. And they can show sometimes you get new neurons, sometimes you're just getting increases in glia or blood vessels. But all of that together seems to promote learning and change and whatnot. So again, we don't know for sure that this is changes in neuronal branching or whatnot, but it's consistent based on what we know from the animal literature. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Great question. All right. How are we doing on time? We're doing good on time. All right. So I'm going to talk about pain. So this was my grad student, Tim Gard. So let's talk about pain for a second. So there's two components of pain. One component of pain is the actual physical sensation of what you're feeling. So burning, stabbing, pulsing, whatever it is, right? The other component is the emotional reaction to it. The actual, so it's not just, oh, there's a prick, or a burning sensation. It's a painful burning sensation, right? And it's an ouch. It's a I don't like it. It's a that aspect of pain as opposed to just the actual sensation. And we know that when the painful stimulus comes in, I should say, it comes in, goes up the spinal cord to the brainstem, and then it gets processed through the brain. And so this blue network, that's the sensory. That's the actual burning, stabbing, throbbing, whatever it is. And then you get sort of more the through the insula and the ACC, and then the sort of the other parts of the brain, you get sort of the more emotional reaction to it. And what's really cool is that we know that there's lots of different ways to control pain. So including like attention and distraction, like, so, oh, look over there, or you don't pay attention to it. Expectation, this isn't going to hurt a bit, right? or placebo, right? If I put a cream on it and say this cream is going to block the pain and you believe me. And what we know is that all of these look the same in the brain. What happens is at the front of the brain, the executive control part of the brain shuts down this network, right? And so what happens is the sensory signal comes in, but then it doesn't go up and it doesn't get processed, right? And it's so you don't feel the pain, right? It does, it's coming in, but it's not getting processed. So the question is, because we know that meditation is good for pain, how does it work? So if this, what we did is we took long-term meditation practitioners and controls, and we put them in the MRI scanner, and we put a mild electric shock to their hand. And the controls, we told them how to be mindful like 5 minutes before they went in the scanner, but they didn't really know what they were doing. And so then they were told to either just lie there and just, in a normal state, or to try to be mindful of the sensation while they were being zapped. And then they rated it both the intensity, right? So how much stinging, stabbing, throbbing there was versus the unpleasantness of it, right? I don't like this. It's painful, right? So here we are, we're looking from above. This is the front of the brain, right? This is the part of the brain that controls and shuts things down and, prevents you from feeling it. And what we see is that, so the green is the mindfulness practitioner, and the blue is the, sorry. Okay. These are the MP is the mindfulness practitioner, CT is the controls. The blue is the normal state, and then the green is in the mindful state. So what we see is that here, this is the part of the brain again that we're shutting things down. The mindfulness practitioners turn this off during mindfulness, versus the controls, when they try to be mindful, are turning it on, right? So they're activating it and shutting down sensory awareness. Versus this is insula, right? This is part of the sensory network. And when we see the mindfulness practitioners, they're turning this up, right? So they're turning up the gain on the sensory versus the controls are shutting it down. So the controls, who don't really know what mindfulness is, it looks like other forms of pain control, right? The front of the brain's coming on and shutting down sensory so you just don't feel it. Versus the mindfulness practitioners are seeing the exact opposite, right? So not only are they not turning on that system to shut things down, they're shutting down the shutdown system, and they're turning up the gain on the sensory system. And when we first saw this, we're like, huh. But then we thought about that definition of mindfulness from the first slide. What is mindfulness? Paying attention to sensory experience in an open and non-judgmental way. So here's the, I don't like it. This is painful. Why am I doing this? Right. And then, trying to control it and make it stop. We're turning that off, right? That's the judginess. We're turning that off. And we're just chilling out and paying attention to the actual sensory experience. Right. So this is, and I forgot. So then in terms of the subjective experience, in terms of the intensity, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much zingingness is there? No change in the two groups. But in terms of the unpleasantness, I don't like it. That is what goes down with mindfulness practitioners. So feeling it more, but reporting that that's less unpleasant. Right? So this is equanimity, right? So we're open to what it's experiencing and we're being okay with it, regardless of what it is. Right? So this is pretty cool. So this quote, life is painful, suffering is optional. Right? This idea that, because we can't control life. Things are going to happen, but we control our reaction to it. Right? That we don't have to, even if we're lying in an MRI scanner getting zapped, we can be okay. We don't have to be there like, oh my God, well, this is horrible. Why am I doing this? Right? We can just be okay. I'm in a scanner and I'm getting shocked. Right? So that's really where mindfulness, kicks in and helps you in your everyday life. So maybe we'll pause here for just a second and see if there's any questions yet.
There isn't any in the Q&A yet.
Okay. All right. And there'll be plenty of time at the end for more. All right. So this is pain. So the actual pain. We're going to talk now about fear of pain, right? or anxiety. Because and why is this important? And so it's kind of sort of similar, but you're going to see it's a little bit different. And also we're going to go a lot deeper into the details of this. So a lot of people with chronic pain, oftentimes they avoid doing things because they think it's going to cause them more pain, right? That's what fear of pain is all about. And it's also, it's threat, right? So we're going to do a fear conditioning protocol leading up to this. And so this idea that, oftentimes when something unpleasant is going to happen, like it's the apprehension, fear, oh God, I do not want to do that, right? It's the anticipation of the negative. And then lots of times what we learn through life is that, oftentimes that anticipation and the fear is worse than the actual thing. And certainly it doesn't make going through the unpleasant experience any worse, right? It's just like, so you can sit there and be negative about it in advance or not, right? And just be open to what's actually going to happen, right? Because sometimes it's the actual opposite. Like you thought it was going to be horrible and then, oh, it was great. So the question is, how does mindfulness play into this? So this is a series of studies. These three lovely women were the first authors on these papers. And I'm gonna walk you through them. All right. So what it was, all three of the studies, well, it was two studies, different papers though. So it's a 2-day fear conditioning protocol, and I'll walk you through this. But basically, it's see a light, get shocked. They then were randomized to either MBSR or weightless control, and then we went and did the fear conditioning again. And then we did the study twice actually. The second time, they were randomized either to MBSR or to an exercise control condition. And all subjects were told that there was no control group, because we know that exercise is actually a really good way to reduce stress. And this is also a big question we had was, we know that exercise is a great way to reduce stress. So if I'm just an average Joe and I'm stressed out, should I meditate or should I exercise? If I like exercising, do I need to meditate? Is all stress reduction the same, right? So how does MBSR compare to exercise? In addition to exercise, they also got information about diet, sleep hygiene, positive attitude, and humor. So the classes were sort of balanced. And they were also both practiced 40 minutes per day at home. So the mindfulness group practiced mindfulness every day at home. The exercise, either exercised or listened to books on tapes relevant to these topics every day. Both groups reduced stress, and that was the same, right? So in terms of stress reduction, the groups were similar. But we also gave them a questionnaires that related to emotion regulation and anxiety, and we see that only the mindfulness group improved the anxiety and the emotion regulation, right? So that was definitely something that mindfulness is giving you something extra beyond exercise. Importantly, the amount of home practice predicted the change in both the stress and the emotion regulation. So the more you practice, the more stress reduction you're going to have, or the more less difficulty with emotion regulation you're going to have. So practicing really does work. It's not just going through the class. All right, so now let's talk about fear conditioning.
Sarah?
Oh yeah,
Quick question on that. Did you also see if more exercise had any positive correlation with, or any correlation with these effects?
We didn't look at that. I hate to say that. This is actually from the first study. We didn't do it again on the second study. I should double check. That's a good question. I didn't do that. Okay. All right. Fear conditioning. So Pavlov's dogs, right? So normally dog, you see bone, he salivates, ring a bell, nothing happens. You put them together enough times, they learn that, when they ring the bell, they salivate, even if you don't give them any food. So now we're going to do the exact same thing, but instead of food, we're going to give them that mild electric shock again. And instead of the bell, they're going to see lights, right? But the same idea is that we're going to pair the light with the shock. And so they're going to learn that the light means I'm going to get shocked, even when they aren't actually shocked. So it looks very similar to the last setup, right? So again, they get this mild electric shock to their hand. but at the same time, they're seeing these lights in the scanner of different colors. And very importantly, when we put them in the scanner, we don't tell them, like in the last one, we told them to be mindful or not be mindful. In this study, we don't do that. We're just like, okay, you're gonna go to the scanner, you're gonna get shocked. Just pay attention to the lights, right? Or, that's all we say, right? So just look at the screen. We do not tell them to be mindful or not. So actually, I'll just go through this. And so again, it's 2 days, there's 3 parts to it. So I'm just gonna walk you through it bit by bit. So first day is conditioning. So we show them 3 different lights. For the red and yellow lights, they get shocked. The blue light, they don't get shocked. So they learn that blue light means I'm safe, red and yellow means I'm gonna get shocked. And in the actual experiment, we changed it up. So sometimes they got shocked to the blue and the yellow, the blue and the red. Okay, so sometimes, so I mean, because sometimes people, think like, oh, red means I'm going to shock. That's a natural sort of association of red and danger. But sometimes, red was safe and yellow and blue were shocked, right? And so everyone was counterbalanced, that whole thing. Okay, so what happened here? So at baseline, this is baseline for both the controls and the mindfulness group. When they saw the red light, this is their skin conductance. They had a big skin conductance reaction, right? So they saw the light, they got shocked. And actually, this is actually, they see the light and then the shock comes right after it, right? So this is when they're actually seeing the lights, right? So they see the red light and they know they're about to get shocked. And so you get this nice, healthy, fear response for both of them. Versus the blue light, you don't get much of anything because they're not going to get shocked. At post, what we see is that there's still the difference between the red and the blue light in the controls, but the response to the red light has gone down tremendously. Versus in the mindfulness group, there's no change. What's going on here? Again, this is a bit of a head scratcher for us. Until again, we thought about the definition of mindfulness, right? We're paying attention non-judgmentally in this open, accepting way. And so what we realized was that, oh, wow. So what's happening in the controls, and this has been replicated now several times in other groups, is that we know that people, even though it's been 8 weeks, people remember, I'm going to get shocked, right? And what do we do? How does pain work? You shut down sensory signals coming in and you don't feel it. And so we think this is what's happening with the controls at post, is that they know they're going to get shocked, right? And so even though we didn't tell them to do anything, it's the fear, it's the anticipation, they're shutting things down so they just don't feel it. Versus the mindfulness group, they're open, they're to experience, even though they know they're about to get shocked, and they allow the shock to happen, right? So again, this is equanimity in action, right? So even though you're lying there, you're in the scanner, you know you're about to get shocked, it's okay. And very importantly, this was related to stress reduction, right? So the more pre and post looked the same, the more stress reduction there was, versus the more you did this, the less stress reduction there was, right? Which is actually really cool. So being open to the shock, feeling the shock, was related to better stress reduction. Also, that differential was related to changes in the major white matter tract between the amygdala and the front of the brain, right? So the more this major fiber tract changed, the more pre and post look the same. So again, it's suggesting that there's better regulation of the amygdala from the front of the brain, and that we're better able to control this amygdala, right? So it's getting smaller, and the connections it does have are changing, and then that's leading to these differential changes in how we respond to threat. All right, so we have more equanimous responding after just 8 weeks of practice, and it's this learning not to fear. Okay, now we're going to talk about fear extinction. So, why is extinction important? So exposure therapy, right? So if you have a spider phobia or any sort of phobia, right, or PTSD and whatnot, the primary way of treating that is exposure therapy, where you're just sort of exposed to the thing that you're afraid of over and over again until gradually the fear goes away. importantly, like, so say you have a spider phobia and they show you pictures of a spider and you're just like, oh, I can't even look at this picture of the spider. You're not going to get better. You have to look at the picture of the spider, and then like they actually bring in real spiders, and you have to like actually like interact with the real spider, right? And otherwise you just don't get better, right? And so we know that mindfulness involves observing present moment in this non-judging, open way. And so we hypothesize that, and we know that mindfulness is good for phobias and general anxiety, PTSD and whatnot. And so the idea is that because we're being more open, it should be optimal conditions for exposure. So how do we test that in the scanner? So first we pair these colors with shocks. They learn that red light means they're going to get shocked. Then during the extinction phase, we show them the lights, but we don't shock them, right? But during this phase, we only show them the red light and the blue light. So blue light, they learn, means I'm still safe. Red light initially means I'm going to get shocked. Red light now means I'm safe, right? So that's extinction. Oh boy. All right. Okay, we got some time. All right. So what happens? What we're seeing here is that this is the salience network, right? So the salience network is the network of the brain that's all about sensing the environment and deciding what to pay attention to, right? So again, this is sort of and sort of sorting things out. And what we see is that, again, in the mindfulness group, there's a big increase in the thalamus. So again, which is sort of one of the brain regions that's sort of a gatekeeper and sort of deciding what sensory signals go where and what we pay attention to. We're seeing big changes in the mindfulness group and not significant reductions in the controls. Also in sensory cortex, again, this is the insula. This is where we're actually feeling it. And then also in parts of DLPFC. So again, this is part of the frontal network, but it's a different part of the frontal network that I showed you before. You get in the caudate, which again has to do with, it's important for learning and memory. And so, and then the other thing we see is the hippocampus, right? Because the hippocampus, because this is about learning. Because first we learn that it's red, that red means I'm gonna get shocked. Now I have to learn that red light means I'm safe. And what we see is that for the mindfulness group, there's a big change in the hippocampus and amygdala, right? And so that initially both groups shut it down, but then after training, the mindfulness group, they're bringing in the amygdala and hippocampus, which again are important for the learning the new association. And so again, so we're getting more attention to the cue and more processing of it in terms of memory, right? And so we're processing it differently. And importantly, the hippocampus structure, the change in the hippocampus structure was related to the changes in hippocampal activation, right? So because I showed you back early on that we're getting increases in the hippocampus. And so this data is showing us that increase in hippocampus is actually conferring a benefit. Because we have this increase in hippocampal structure, we're better able to remember that the red light means I'm safe. But very importantly, okay. So now, for those of you who are on at the beginning, this is my favorite slide. This is a cool slide. So what are we looking at? This is, so here it is, they're lying in the scanner, they're not actually getting shocked. What are they paying attention to? The yellow is what the mindfulness group is paying attention to. The pink is what the activation for the controls, right? This is the hand area. This is the part of the cortex that represents the hands. So here it is, the mindfulness group, they're not actually getting shocked. They're in the scan, they're just seeing red and yellow lights and blue lights. And we told them, pay attention to the lights. But the mindfulness group, post-training, has increased activation and connectivity between the amygdala and the hand area, even though they're not actually being shocked. The controls, meanwhile, this is visual cortex. So they have increased awareness, right? They're paying more attention to the lights. right, than the controls. Than the meditation group. So the controls are paying attention to the lights, the meditation group are paying attention to their hand, right? So again, it's this idea that you're just in your body and paying attention to your body. And so paying attention to your mindfulness of your body, even, in this weird situation where you're seeing lights that are threatening. And what we saw was that, so during the first few, where they're actually, because the first few, because we don't tell them they're not going to get shocked, right? So that we just tell them before they go in the scanner, you're going to see a bunch of lights, you may or may not get shocked. So during the extinction phase, we didn't tell them, they still think they may get shocked. So the first few, what we see is that there's increased connectivity between the amygdala and this region, this hand region. But then by the end, they've learned, okay, I'm not getting shocked anymore. So, but they're still activating this region. And now, in addition to the amygdala, it's also being attached to the hippocampus, right? So again, the hippocampus is all about memory. So it seems like they're better able to put this sensory experience into their memory. So they're better remembering this experience of not being shocked. We also saw increased connectivity between the hippocampus and the posterior cingulate, right? So remember I told you these all are working in a network, and it's about the self, right? And so the self is, we know this is personal relevance, right? And this particular part of the PCC, it's about memory confidence and memory retrieval, right? So again, all of this is hinting at, okay, we're better consolidating this memory. Like we're processing this memory differently after the mindfulness training compared to controls, right? So we're activating it, we're engaging the hippocampus and the PCC differently following mindfulness training. So then, and again, it seems like, so it's the, so how we're processing this is consistent with better memory following mindfulness training. So this is why we bring it back then day 2, right? So on day 2, we bring it back and say, okay, did you actually remember it better, right? And this has important implications. So we know that people with anxiety, depression, and whatnot, they do worse on this, right? They're really bad at remembering that red light means I'm safe. And this has, so think about it in terms of PTSD, right? And the soldiers come back, they hear the car backfire, and they're back in the trenches, right? And so you have to learn that no, that yes, if I was in the trenches, yes, I need to be, have fear of that sort of sound, but I'm home. And in this environment, I don't have to worry about cars backfiring. That doesn't mean, there's danger right now, right? So understanding the context of where I am and remembering that, okay, that sound or that light or that whatever is okay. It's not fear. It's not danger. It's really important for extinction learning and for all sorts of anxiety disorders. So extinguished memories must be remembered, right? And again, so anxiety patients and depression patients, they tend to not remember, right? That they see, when we bring them back on day 2, we show them that red light, they respond as if they're still going to get shocked. They forget that it's been extinguished, right? And they know that also that the hippocampus is really crucial for this, because again, people with anxiety and depression tend to have small hippocampi, and that the size and structure of the hippocampus seems to play a role in your ability to properly remember whether the red light means I'm going to get shocked or whether I'm safe. So putting it all together. So day 2, we bring them back. So first they learn red light means I'm going to get shocked. Then they learn red means I'm safe. So now, again, we show them all the lights, all 3 lights, but we don't shock them at all. And so red light still means I'm safe. Blue light means I'm safe. And now the question is the yellow light. Because initially, yellow light meant I was going to get shocked. And so the question is, when they're comparing response to red light, does the red light look more like the yellow light or more like the blue light? Right? So if they have properly remembered that red light means I'm safe, the red and the blue should look more similar, versus they've forgotten the red and yellow look more similar. And what we see is that in the mindfulness group, they better remember, right? The difference between red and blue is, or red and yellow is more significant for the meditation group than the controls. So the controls are more likely to forget and to respond like the yellow light, versus the meditation group is more likely to respond like the blue. And again, we counterbalanced all colors across time and everything else. All right, so now what about the brain? So first we're going to talk about the first few trials, because again, we show them, I think it's like 15 times. They see all the lights 15 times. And so what about the first few times? Because here it is, again, we put them in the scanner. They don't know that they're not going to get shocked. We just say, the scanner, you may or may not be shocked. So when they're in there, which memory do they recall? Do they correctly recall the safety memory or the initial conditioning memory? And what we see here is that in the mindfulness group, they are activating retrospinal cortex, which is about context, and an area of DLPFC, which is about suppressing the conditioning, right? The initial memory, right? And that this was related to changes in gray matter. So again, the more the gray matter changed, the better they were at suppressing the first, I'm going to get shocked memory, and also remembering the context. I didn't talk about context about this, but that's okay. That's a sort of another detail, right? So they're better able to select the correct memory. Then we asked, okay, so then as it continued throughout the rest of the scan, what happened? Because we know that, because again, they didn't know that they weren't going to get shocked. What we see is that, again, sensory cortex got lit up. And it's the exact same area of sensory cortex that was lit up during extinction. So during extinction, they paid attention to their hand, and they better remembered that, and they processed that memory of the safety differently, right? And now it looks like during recall, they've reactivated that memory, right? And so they're paying attention to their hand, or that area of the hand is being activated, specifically in the mindfulness group. And, so that's unique. Meanwhile, the controls, this is an area of sensory cortex again. And it's well known that this area of sensory cortex is related to anxiety, right? And vigilance. And again, this is differential for the controls. And this is related to, again, to the gray matter. And so what we saw was that, again, the more connectivity between the subiculum, which is a subregion of the hippocampus, and this anxiety region, visual anxiety region, that was decreasing in the meditators, well, on everyone combined, right? And that the more this was decreased, the less anxiety people had. So the meditators were uncoupling the hippocampus from this region, and that was related to the decrease in anxiety, versus the controls, there was, I guess either no change or a slight increase, right? So the meditators, they're turning off the anxiety provoking the vigilant part of visual cortex, and they're turning on the sensory awareness of the hand, right? And that's what they're differentially remembering. We also saw this, which is again the SMG, supramarginal gyrus, which again is this region where we found structural changes after just 8 weeks. And what we see is that, again, the MBSR group was better able to engage it compared to the controls. And again, this is the area that's involved in, do I pay attention to my inner world or my outer world? Or just attention in general. And so it really seems that the mindfulness group, so it's better engaging this. And so it's, you're more choosing what you pay attention to rather than just things happening, right? And that this correlated with practice time. So the more you practice, the more you engage this region. And so you're better able to sort of actively choose, what am I paying attention to? So putting it all together, what we see is that they're activating this region, so they're better able to choose, and are choosing to pay attention to the sensory cortex, the hand area, and choosing not to pay attention to the visual stream, right? So the vigilance, the hypervigilance, and paying attention to the lights, because the lights, you may, at this point, you've learned the red light means you're getting shocked. Then you learn that red light means you're not going to get shocked. The yellow light yesterday meant I was getting shocked. Now today it's not. Maybe you're going to get shocked. Maybe you're not. Lights are not reliable, right? So let's just pay attention to what's actually happening in the present moment. And in the present moment, I'm not getting shocked, right? Again, this is a little bit of hand waving, a little bit of interpretation, but this is basically what the data is strongly suggesting, right? And so on day 2, so first of all, in the first few moments, you are selecting, okay, do I pay attention? Do I remember that the red light means I'm safe, or do I, forget that? How well do I remember that? And then what happens afterwards? Okay, so I'm safe. What do I do? So again, I just continue paying attention to my hand rather than stressing out about what the lights are going to say. So the conclusion is that mindfulness of the body. So first we show is about the pain itself. We're showing that mindfulness of the body is also good for the fear of the pain and the anticipation, the dread, all of that, right? And it's driven by changes in the hippocampus and the amygdala, and also the functional connectivity and the activity of these regions. And we're shifting from thinking about and defending against threat to experiencing it openly and with equanimity, right? And so putting this all together, we have this really radical change in how we are experiencing life. So we got a hand, great. So this is the end. So we can, I guess I'll stop talking and we'll just take questions.
Yeah, actually, just a minor question, because you were showing MBSR compared to SME as a control, and I forgot what SME stands for.
Exercise, the stress management exercise program.
Oh, okay, thanks. That's it.
Yeah, and so this is actually good. And so so here, the last one. So meditation and innovation is serene encounter with reality, right? Yeah, I'll leave that up there just because it's a good one. Because this is the thing. And so exercise, remember, because this is against exercise, right? And so exercise, they're used to paying attention to their body, right? So it's not like they're just, reading books, the control group, and they were doing, strength training, right? So they're really paying attention to their body during their 8 weeks of training, right? So it's not like they, but they're paying attention to it in a very different way, right? So it's all about, oh, look at my big muscles and, oh, I'm strong, right? As opposed to, oh, what am I actually experiencing, right? And so it's sort of so anyways, yeah. So it's really clear that it's not just body awareness; it's this mindful body awareness that makes it.
Well, I would just add that the exercise is often associated with more secretion of endorphins, which is one way of reducing pain. But an important series of studies by Zaiden showed that mindful awareness, meditation, actually reduced pain through a different mechanism, the more direct neural mechanism going right down to the periaqueductal gray and stuff, instead of being based on endorphins, because they actually used naloxone to block the placebo effect, and it didn't block the meditation reduction of pain.
Exactly. Yeah, no. In fact, it's anecdotal, but actually I think they've actually published on this now. Long-term meditators often find naloxone, or not, find opioids aversive, which is really interesting. Like, okay, what's going on there, right? And so it's like, so lots of times, like they don't like pain meds. It's like, yeah, no, this doesn't feel good. So it's interesting. It's really, really interesting. Yeah. It looks like we have another question from Anjik. And Angqi, I don't know.
Yeah,
Angqi.
You're on.
Yeah, we cannot hear him.
He just unmuted.
Right. But the audio is not coming through.
Okay.
Also, alternative, Angqi, you can also post in the chat. It seems like no, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's good. So it's really interesting talk, Dr. Lazar. And I have a question for the last part about the meditators, which the motor sensor is activate, but not the.
Oops, we lost you there.
Lost him again. Probably it's a Wi-Fi issue.
Yeah, so it's sensory versus motor. I think, yeah, let me go back. And so I must say, this is not my area of expertise. So during here, I think this is sensory, right? But then during extinction, it was down more in the gyri, sulci. I always confuse those two. Is down more in the sulci. Do I have that figure? Yeah. So here, this is during recall. And so versus here, sorry, this is during extinction. This is during recall. So during recall, it's actually in the sensory. Here, you're getting a little bit in sensory, but yeah, I agree. There is a little bit in motor as well. And so the thing is, so we don't know, right, is a short answer. I think there has been a little bit, oh, I don't know. That down in the sulci is important for memory in general. And I'm thinking also because it might be a little bit of because probably I'm guessing that there is probably a motor reaction, like when they're getting shocked, they probably tense their muscles a bit, is my guess, right? Or there's a little bit of motion because of they're getting shocked. And so that may be part of what we're seeing here. But again, you do get a little bit in sensory, and then sensory for sure during day 2 and recall. Good question. No one's ever asked me that before.
I had a question. Wait. Actually, before that, yeah, for the folks in the attendees audience, feel free to raise your hand or post in the chat, and we'll be happy to get you in on the conversation. So my question was, so when they're going through these tests in the scanner, the subjects are the MBSR group or the control group, they are not doing, they're just being asked to pay attention to the lights and so on, right? As in like, have you tried like, or maybe I missed this, where the MBSR group was actually doing some meditation during that process?
We have not done that. Because for me, the interesting question is, what are the benefits of this practice? Like, we don't go around meditating all day. We can't go around meditating all day, right? And also, we don't have cues from people throughout the day saying, hey, remember to meditate. Oh, remember to be mindful. So the question was, can we test that? So we put them in the scanner and we don't tell them anything. So what's sort of naturally spontaneous arising without us cueing them at all in any way? And obviously they know they're being tested, blah, 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 this whole thing, but we don't tell them, and so that it's maybe not completely a pure test of that, but more so than if we explicitly tell them. And there have been some studies, where people have said, okay, be mindful in the scanner. And, oftentimes it's hard to interpret those results because I think it's sort of because people are trying to do something, right? And so I like this. It's a little bit more cleaner, more pure reaction.
Okay. So the other question I had was like, have you done, tried any structural MRI alongside the functional aspect?
Yeah. So this was was related to structure. So I should put, okay. So in the first study that we did, those were highly stressed people. We did not, and actually we recruited them from the Center for Mindfulness at UMass, right? And they get a lot of patients, and we did not screen out anything. The only requirement was that they were not taking psychotropic medications in that first study. So probably some of our people in that first study were anxious and depressed. This study, we screened out everything. Like, we screened for depression, we screened for anxiety, meds, everything. And so if people were depressed or anxious, they were out. So in this study, there was no overall group change in hippocampal structure, but changes in structure were very clearly related to changes in activation and functional connectivity. And we know that not everyone practices, like you tell everyone to practice every day for 40 minutes, but we know some people only practice, a couple days a week, or they only practice for 10 or 20 minutes. Some people completely stop practicing. So it suggests that, if you practice and practice effectively, that, and your hippocampus changes, that then those, you will get these benefits. But it is dependent on you, again, practicing and getting the structural changes.
And so then right. So the other question is like, how does the duration of practice affect any of this, right? If someone is doing mindfulness meditation for, an hour a day, and or versus someone, just has enough time to do 10 minutes a day,
right?
Somewhere in between. And
right. And again, we saw some of the changes. So some of the, I think I showed some of these, right? So I already showed. So some of the changes, there's correlations with practice time. Some of them there isn't. And so it's hard to know how to interpret that. Like, why should some correlate but not others? It's hard to know how to interpret that.
I would mention also that there's a lot of data about, oh, sorry, I got an interrupt in my network. There's a lot of data showing the insula gets denser for people practicing meditation, especially body scan type meditations, because they're really boosting their interoception. So that's a big structural change you see with meditation regularly.
Yes. Yeah, I know. And so again, we didn't see it in this study, but again, it could be, and actually what I recall is that the insula, I think it tends to be more like in the long-term practitioners that you see the insula. Like that was our first study was and so that was like the people who had been practicing for like 5-10 years. So definitely, yes, you can get changes in the insula, but at least structurally they tend to be smaller. But again, not in this study, but well, we did, I saw a little bit of the insula during extinction, we saw the insula, but not during recall. But
oh, right. So yeah, sometimes I forget that you've only been doing it for 8 weeks.
Right, exactly. Yeah, which is amazing that we see anything at all.
So it is interesting that to supplement it with comparisons of very experienced meditators with novices, you can't make the causal connection there. But, by combining these two comparisons, one with before, after, and novices, and then experienced meditators versus non-experienced meditators, it tells a story.
Exactly. Yeah, and we know, like anyone who's practiced knows that 8 weeks is just you're scratching the surface. That there's just the more you practice, just the deeper and deeper and deeper you get, and the better you're able to, to deal with adverse conditions. I didn't show this data, but in the pain, so we didn't look at it, but another group did a very similar study to us, and what they showed is that there was changes in functional connectivity between the insula and the frontal region. And that connection correlated with years of meditation experience and also correlated with the pain tolerance threshold. So the more you've been practicing, the more pain you're able to tolerate, and the more the front of the brain, like that, I don't like this, make it stop, and the actual sensory experience was getting decoupled. So pretty cool.
So the question now is, are we doing just Q&A, or is there a little more talk to do?
So I'm still recording, so maybe we could end the recording part and let it be more informal at this point. So I'll stop the recording. Thank you, Sara, again for your wonderful talk.
Sure.